Hey guys, it's Chelsea, and before we dive into this awesome new series, The 15-Minute Budget, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Monarch. So for those of you who don't know, I used to be a Mint power user. I loved that app. It was how I initially started tracking my budget way back when I had a ruined credit score and was like deathly afraid of even looking at my bank accounts. But over the years, it really became like my tool and touchstone to just staying plugged into my financial life, even well after I didn't really need to be worried about my money like that anymore. So when Mint was going away, it was extremely important for me to find the right replacement to become my catch-all budgeting / money management app. So I started using Monarch, which was not only started by some former employees of Mint, but also I find to be a very familiar and easy to use user experience, and just generally makes me feel like I have a hold on my money at all times. The goal of the 15-minute budget is to show you that managing your money doesn't have to be a chore, and Monarch is the perfect tool to help you take the extra energy out of managing that money. You can use it to budget, set goals, and actually understand where your money's going with no guesswork needed on your end. And you don't even have to take my word for it because Monarch was named the best Mint replacement by Forbes. And there are also no ads or selling your financial data to third parties, just a clean, secure app that makes finances feel simple. Monarch helps you manage money your way with a flexible budgeting system that's built for real life, custom categories, and a full view of all your accounts and transactions. You can track your net worth as it grows, which I do, collaborate on finances with a partner, which I do, and create monthly summaries and reports to make your money check-ins stress-free, which I love. Join over 1 million other Monarch users. Head to monarchmoney.com/landing/TFD or the link in our description box and get 50% off your first year with code TFD. If you've ever hit add to cart after a tough day or treated yourself and your bestie to a drink just because it felt good, you might be an emotional spender. Welcome back to the 15-Minute Budget. This is a series that's dedicated to helping you design the ideal budget for you using different tips based on common personality traits that I see as a financial therapist. I'm Lindsay Bryan-Podvin, social worker, certified financial therapist, and founder of the financial wellness business, Mind Money Balance. I am thrilled to be back here with TFD to offer you some insights to help you deal with the emotions that come up and think through different ways that you can cope with how you're feeling that don't resort to tapping or swiping. Okay, so some personality traits of the emotional spender. You might be an emotional spender if your impulse buys often have a theme. When you're stressed, when you need comfort, when you're bored. You absolutely love giving gifts, but then there's this guilt hangover that comes when you realize how much you spent. You've heard yourself say things like, I know I shouldn't buy this, but ... and fill in some sort of reason why you actually should buy it. You budget with your heart first. Look, these things are not bad per se, but it's a sign. It's a sign or a signal that you aren't actually tending to your emotional needs. Spending works. It literally feels good. I'll get to that in a little bit. But it's so important that you have alternative ways to deal with your emotions. Doing this helps you meet both your emotional needs and your financial needs. What you have tried. Most budgeting is super logical, but emotions drive how we spend. In fact, research shows that between 80 and 90% of our financial decisions are based on how we feel. So if you have tried something like a no spend challenge, it probably has backfired because spending is emotional. You also might have tried guilt-based budgeting. This is the type of budgeting that sounds like shoulda, woulda, coulda. Things like, I should be able to say no, or I would stop spending if only, ... And the way that this guilt-based budgeting shows up for you is that instead of actually addressing your emotional needs, you have a ton of shopping bags in your closet or in the trunk of your car that you are just meaning to return but haven't quite gotten around to. And you've also probably tried different types of apps that scold you for spending on things that you tell them you don't want to spend on. And this often looks like an app slapping your hand and telling you, hey, you messed up if you buy a green juice and didn't properly allocate that line item in your budget. So what do we do about this? What do we do about this emotional spending? Let's get to some of the tips. Honestly, as a financial therapist, I love working with emotional spenders. Why? If you're an emotional spender, then by default, you are spending in response to an emotion. And as a financial therapist, we can get to work, so to speak, a lot sooner if those emotions and those behaviors are right at the surface. This means we don't have to spend a lot of time digging into what's going on. We can usually figure it out pretty quickly. So if you identify as an emotional spender, or maybe you have heard yourself refer to yourself as a shopaholic, here are my 4 budgeting tips just for you. Number 1, start with the emotions. As I mentioned, as a financial therapist, we get to the emotions. Instead of tracking your spending by how many dollars are going out, I want you to kind of categorize your spending based on emotions. You can categorize using different emojis. For example, the smiling emoji means you were happy when you bought that thing, or the sad emoji means you were sad when you bought that thing, or maybe the melting face is when you were overwhelmed at work. But we're going to start getting some sort of categories going for what's going on when you're spending money. If emojis don't work for you, you can color code with some highlighters or just take a note in your notes app. When we spend, we get a hit of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So when people say they're doing things like shopping to get their dopamine hit, they aren't lying. In non-jargon, this means that when we shop, we get some sort of feel-good chemical that's released into our body. If we're looking for something new and exciting, we're often trying to get our dopamine needs met. If we're bored or lonely, we're probably looking for a connection, and what we really need is oxytocin. If we just need that warm hug feeling, we're looking for serotonin or happiness. And if we just need to feel like we accomplished something for the day, we're probably looking for endorphins. So as you start to track your spending based on emotions instead of dollars, you'll start to see a pattern. Maybe you're finding yourself spending a lot when you're lonely after a long day of work or being holed up at home working on your laptop all day, and you are shopping to try and get that oxytocin or that social connection. If you find that a lot of your purchases are happening because you feel that way, what can you do instead? What are other ways you can get your social needs met? Maybe you can join your neighborhood Sunday walking group, or maybe you can schedule a phone call with your bestie who lives across the country. What else can you do to get that emotional need met? Tip number 2 for my emotional spenders is to make sure that there is some flexibility and room for fun in your budget. I personally call this a fun money fund, and it is a line item in my budget that I use for exactly that. This is for spontaneous spending, like going and getting happy hour cocktails with friends that wasn't necessarily on the calendar, or buying that cute ring on my walk home from work that isn't necessarily in my budget per se. But building in a soft place for this type of spontaneous spending to land can prevent you from feeling like you're being restricted or you're not allowed to spend money on things that don't neatly fit into a certain type of budget category. By allocating money for fun, for flexibility, you are working with your brain, you are working with those emotional tendencies instead of trying to fight against them. Another way that you can make your budget fun is to gamify it. You can create a bingo card for yourself for all of the things that you want to do this year, like a recent TFD workshop attendee shared, and check them off as you do them. Think about other ways to make a budget or a spending plan feel good and enhancing instead of making you feel like you're restricting yourself or feeling badly. The third tip is to get curious about why spending is your go-to response. In the first tip, I talked about what's going on emotionally for you here and now. But as a therapist, I know that we get our beliefs about money when we are children. So it's imperative that we take a moment to go back in time and figure out who taught me how to respond to my feelings in this way, or how might I have learned to cope through things. I want to share several examples to help you get a little bit closer to what I mean. One is maybe you were taught that things equal love. For example, if your parents missed a dance recital or a volleyball tournament, would they send you a huge bouquet of flowers or send you lunch there instead of physically being there? If that was the way that you were taught, that things equal love or gifts equal love, you might be redoing that pattern in your current life. The second thing is the cool auntie effect. If your caregivers were maybe a little bit emotionally distant, but you had somebody like a cousin, an auntie, or a neighbor who did fun things with you, and oftentimes those fun things were associated with tangible things, you might start to associate having things with emotional connections or being seen or having quality time, and you might be replicating it right now. The third thing is social survival. As social creatures, we want to fit in, and we learn at a very young age what we are supposed to wear, what we are supposed to eat, or what we are supposed to listen to in order to fit into our specific community. We learn really quickly whether or not we belong or whether or not we don't belong. And nowadays, we do that through signaling with our purchases. You know, the capacious bag scene from Succession is kind of like that.
Because she's brought a ludicrously capacious bag.
This was a character who tried to fit into the 1% by carrying a bag, but everybody there knew that quiet luxury was in and sharing the brands were out. So at some point in time, that character probably learned, if I carry this specific type of bag, I will be welcomed into the community, not realizing that that didn't translate across other socioeconomic statuses. Look, that might not be your or my lived examples now, but we've all experienced a time where having that pair of shoes or that specific lipstick helps us to fit in and to have that, hey, you belong with us type of feeling. We've all been next to a Chaz at a happy hour who's wearing some sort of like cool faced watch and is just talking about it the whole time. And honestly, when I'm in that situation, I'm just thinking in my head, like, oh, this is so sad. You must have been rejected a lot and feel like this is the one way for you to fit in. Please, please, please work on healing your inner child so you don't become Chaz at happy hour. I promise you, you do not have to shop your way to acceptance. The fourth thing is self-esteem. So this is less of I need to fit in and much more of I need to feel good about myself. There's nothing wrong with buying that pair of jeans because you look and feel so good in them. And we need to make sure that we aren't relying on the I need this thing so I look good, feel good, etc. as the only way to feel good about ourselves. It's so important that we cultivate other ways for us to feel good about ourselves. Oftentimes this is engaging in hobbies, volunteering, calling a friend, thinking about the different things that make us feel good and reflect who we are that aren't just about having the latest gadget or clothes or home decor as a way to say like, yeah, I feel really good. And then finally, another thing that I see is if you were raised in a situation where money prevented you from being able to have things or have access to things. In other words, you heard versions of, we can't afford it or it's not allowed. And now that maybe you're in a different financial situation than you were when you were growing up, you don't want to miss out. You are kind of pushing back against being told, we can't afford it. It's not in the cards. We're not allowed to have it. And so you find yourself saying yes and potentially spending on things that you don't actually want or need, but just because it's this reflex to say, I'm not there anymore, I want to do it differently. So you find yourself potentially buying things or attending events or going to concerts that you don't actually want to do just because you feel like you can. So those are some reasons to go a little bit deeper. And once you figure out what it is that's preventing you from being able to stick to a budget based on these emotional reasons, I often find that once you do that, it's much easier to change those spending behaviors. One of the most frequent tips I give in this scenario is to acknowledge where you come from and acknowledge where you are now. So this isn't about, sweeping your past under the rug. Instead, it's really about having compassion and curiosity for why you do what you do based on your upbringing. So this might sound like, it makes sense that I want to say yes to every single invitation that comes my way because growing up I was told no. And I care about myself enough to be able to say no to the types of spending that isn't aligned with my values or my goals. So you're acknowledging where you came from and where you are now. Tip number 4 for my emotional spenders is to find ways to show you care outside of spending money. If gift giving is your love language, I want you to practice alternative ways to say, hey, I care about you that don't involve spending money or involve spending less money. Maybe a gorgeous hand-poured jasmine candle absolutely screams your bestie. And your inclination would be to buy it, to wrap it up, to add a few more things to that box and send it off her way. Here's my loving challenge to you. Instead of doing that, you still want to convey, hey, I was thinking about you, I care about you, but we can do it in a new way. You can snap a picture of that candle and shoot off a really sweet and meaningful text that says something like, hey, I'm at this adorable shop. It reminded me of this time that we went on vacation to this particular place. Plus, this scent so reminds me of you. I love you. I miss you. I hope you're doing well. What we are doing there is still extending care, still extending meeting, and still being thoughtful without always having to have a physical thing that we are spending money on and giving to other people in that way. Another example is maybe your monthly book club doles out different roles or different assignments each month. So somebody's in charge of food, somebody's in charge of drinks, and somebody's in charge of decor. When you're assigned flowers or decor, for example, instead of ordering like an over the top bespoke arrangement that perfectly matches the book, can you head to your local farmer's market or Trader Joe's and still stick within that theme? Maybe finding a particular color palette that matches that book or a type of plant or greenery that fits in alignment with one of those characters. How can you get creative and say, hey, I want this to be a beautiful space and I'm interested in personally saving some money? Even though it can feel weird, if your go-to way of saying, hey, I care about you is by spending money and by sending things to people, sometimes when we let people in on why, it creates that little bit of vulnerability that we're extending to them. We can actually bond on an even deeper level. So for example, with that friend who you would normally send a bespoke candle to, you can say when you next have your phone catch up, hey, this is a little embarrassing, or I feel a little bit weird saying this, but I'm really trying to pull back on my spending. So you might notice that I'm sending more texts or calling you a little bit more often instead of sending you physical things. I just want you to know that this is hard for me, but I still love you and I still care about you. And also, please hold me accountable to not send you things unless it's on your birthday or something to that effect. And what that does is, even though it's a little bit anxiety provoking, we are saying to our friend in this scenario, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, and we're inviting them in to join with us in this particular new phase of vulnerability. And when that happens, the recipient in this example often feels like, oh my gosh, this is a person who trusts me with something that feels hard or feels big. This is such a gift that they trust me enough to witness me with this information. And so I invite you, I encourage you, I challenge you to try it out. So, for my emotional spenders, the 4 tips I offered today to help you budget are to start with your emotions in the moment. Are you looking for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, or endorphins? 2, making sure your budget has room for flexibility and fun. 3, going a little bit deeper and figuring out why these behaviors are your go-to behaviors. And number 4 is to find out alternative ways to show that you care. As a reminder, if spending money is your go-to coping skill, it's a sign that you need something emotionally. And I hope that this video helped you figure out different ways that you can tend to your needs while adhering to your budget. So this week, I want you to do one thing that honors your emotional needs that doesn't require swiping your card or tapping to pay. And thank you so much for joining me on this 15-minute budget series. It's been such a joy for me to be able to share with you some insights and tips from the therapy room to help you adhere to that budget so you can hit your financial goals. Take good care. Bye.